Hello and welcome to today's webinar, How We Play, Co-Creating Outdoor Spaces for Black Children and What They Want. My name is Emily, and I am so thrilled to welcome you all, as well as our two speakers, Dr. Deja Jones and Ashley Causey-Golden, for today's webinar, which explores a very important topic in our field. So many people were interested in attending this presentation that it's actually our biggest webinar to date, which is a huge testament to the value of the work that our two speakers, Deja and Ashley, and many others are doing to make nature-based learning more accessible, equitable, and responsive to the needs of all children. We're focusing on Black children in this webinar because that's been the focus of Deja's research and Ashley's work and their experience, but it reflects this broader idea of appreciating each child as an individual with a unique set of experiences that inform how they interact with the world. Before handing the mic over to Deja and Ashley, I'd like to briefly share why this topic is so important, not only within the context of education generally, but nature-based early childhood education, which is, of course, our focus at the Alliance. And I know that Deja and Ashley will be diving deeper into this too. They have many examples, research, and resources that we will make available when we publish the recording of this session. But I wanted to just quickly share a few high-level points that highlight the importance of this work and why it's so valuable to us to have Deja and Ashley sharing today. First, we know that Black children are underrepresented in nature-based programs. Natural Start conducted a survey of nature preschools in the United States last year, and data shows that there are racial disparities in who is attending as well as who is staffing nature-based programs. So as nature-based education continues to grow, we really need to be thinking about what we're offering and whether programs are meeting the needs and expectations of Black families and Black children. A quick note that the survey only explored who is attending or not attending nature preschools and not the barriers or motivations as to why certain individuals or groups are or are not enrolling in nature preschools. So more research is needed to better understand this. There's also a growing body of research that demonstrates both historical and present systemic barriers to accessing nature, particularly for racially and economically marginalized communities, the LGBT community, and disabled persons. And lastly, we know that culturally responsive education, or education that considers the varying cultural identities, prior experiences, and frames a reference of all children, especially those that identify with cultures traditionally excluded from mainstream settings, is just good teaching. Research indicates that instruction that reflects students' backgrounds and experiences are essential to engagement and deep, meaningful learning. And studies have found that a strong racial ethnic identity is linked to higher self-esteem, academic attitudes, well-being, and the ability to navigate discrimination. Which leads us to our two accomplished speakers, Dr. Deja Jones and Ashley Causey-Golden, who are bringing both their professional work and their own lived experiences to today's presentation. Deja Jones is the founder and head of school at Honeypot Montessori, a nature-based Montessori school in Newark, New Jersey. And she recently completed her PhD. Pause for a round of applause. Deja's research concentrations are tackling the emerging effects of environmental racism in early childhood development, building resiliency in Black youth through environmental education, and increasing awareness around sustainability in urban communities like Newark. And Ashley Causey-Golden is the creator of Afrocentric Montessori and co-founder of Gather Forest School, among the many other hats she wears. Gather Forest School was founded to facilitate child-centered, nature-based educational experiences rooted in Black culture and identity for Black families. And I know they're both going to share a little bit more about themselves when in a moment here when they take over. Before I hand it over, just a couple of quick housekeeping notes. While Deja and Ashley are presenting, feel free to type questions in the chat. We'll keep track of them. We might have time to have questions answered throughout the presentation, and we'll do our best to save time for questions at the end as well. And another note that this webinar is being recorded, and we will share it probably next week along with resources. So thank you everyone for being here. We're so excited to have these two wonderful speakers with us today. So I will hand it over to them. And again, thank you.
Thank you for having us. I think this is my second Natural Start webinar that I've done with you all, and I'm super happy to be back. And I'm happy to be sharing this space with Ashley. Um, so Ashley, if you want to make a comment while I'm sharing my screen.
Of course, yes. Greetings, 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 everyone. I see people in the chat saying where they're from. Do want to give a shout out to my co-founder, Shelby. I see her in up there, as well as a number of our Gather families. That's what's up. So thank y'all for coming. As you can hear, I do have a 7-month-old that I am baby wearing. So there will be times where I might just need to mute to get her settled. I also have, well, let me not jump in because we're going to talk about who we are and all the identities and things we hold. So I'll pause. But yes, welcome all. Greetings again. So I am a mother of 2 children. So I have a 2.5-year-old that's outside of this room, and I have a 7-month-old that I'm currently baby wearing. I am the co-founder of Gather Forest School, and like I just shared before, my other co-founders on the call, Shelby Stone Still. So again, thank you for supporting and being here. I am passionate about Montessori and centering Black culture and Black identity into Montessori. I also am the creator of Afrocentric Montessori, and I am a lover of trees, especially if it's sweets with chocolate. So my intention with this presentation is that you leave with actionable steps to become agents of power to co-create spaces of wonder and learning while keeping the Black child front and center. You will notice in this presentation, we do not include a book list because we really want to push past just listening and learning and really move to a place of action.
And I'm Deja. My pronouns are she, her. I live, work, and play between two very different cities. So I was born and raised in Trenton, New Jersey, where I currently live, and then I work in Newark, New Jersey, which is where I've only ever worked in education. Two vastly different cities. One is majorly redeveloped within the last few years, and so there's this growing need to retain green spaces. Whereas in Trenton, it's a little bit underdeveloped and there's a massive green space, but not a lot of city innovation. So two very different cities. I'm a former nutrition and environmental educator through the Food Corps program with Newark Public Schools. And the reason why I highlight that position is because it was one of the first jobs that I had in education that really put me in a position of nature. But then also it was a learning experience for me of coming into like this nature awareness while I'm doing it with children. And so there was this co-creating of nature spaces in Newark Public Schools where I'm learning as I go, but then I'm also working with students and I'm learning with children. Food Corps is a national organization. They are affiliated with AmeriCorps. And so if you do have AmeriCorps in your community or in your state, definitely look into Food Corps. It is a great resource to have, especially when it comes to capacity building. And so if you are a school that might feel a little strained or overextended, but you really want to have nature experiences in your school, Food Corps is definitely a great organization to partner with that will that will come in with a lot of their own resources. And then I'm the founder of Honeypot Montessori. We are a nature-based Montessori school in Newark, New Jersey. We are the only nature-based preschool in Newark, and we're the only Montessori in Newark as well. And so very innovative initiative coming to a city where it's never been before. It's been a learning experience. It's been a rewarding experience. I love connecting small children to nature. I love seeing how it activates their creativity. I love seeing the sense of wonder that blossoms in them when they discover different aspects of nature. I love gardening myself. It is very therapeutic, and I love books. I'm a major book nerd. To begin our presentation, I do want to start off by talking about research. As Emily said, I just completed my dissertation and just completed my PhD in transformative social change at Saybrook University, where my research focused on Black children's experiences in nature. And I knew that going into this research study, I wanted it to contribute to a more positive psychological literature where it's not focusing so much on deficits, on what doesn't exist, what we don't have, or like all the things that marginalize us. But I wanted to examine, well, what does exist, you know? And I know that childhood is a very multifaceted concept. And so I went into this knowing that I would get multiple perspectives on a single concept, which is the relationship that Black children have to nature. And so I conducted this research study through interviews. So I interviewed children, I observed them playing in the park or in their backyards or with their family. And then we also did a lot of art-based reflection. And so I wanted to know what nature looked like to them. And so they drew pictures interpreting that. The study, it followed 8 children using an inclusion criteria, which meant that in order for children to be included in the study, they had to meet the criteria of identifying as Black or of African descent. They had to speak English. They had to be between the ages of 5 to 10, which is, you know, generally elementary school age. And then also they had to be a child who frequently participates in nature to get like that robust like collection of narratives on what they like to do. And so I work with children between Connecticut, Delaware, Maryland, New Jersey, New York, Pennsylvania, and Virginia, so the northeastern part of the US. And when I did my data analysis, I used a thematic analysis where I was able to look at all of these narratives that I collected from the children to pull out some major themes that kept resurfacing. And so some of my findings, when I asked them various questions on such as who do they like to participate in nature with, I learned that many children had nature experiences because of the adults in their lives. And so this let me see that children are more likely to participate in nature when they have close adults, whether it's family members, caregivers, teachers, community members, and even friends who had nature experiences. Um, you know, how do they learn in nature? And I know sometimes we like to, you know, push aside technology and the 21st century learning. However, a lot of the Black children were able to name that they learn about nature through media and games. And so PBS Wildcrats was a very popular show that came up to learn about animals and how to take care of animals in their natural habitats. Another a mobile phone app that came up was Plants versus Zombies, which is a game, but the plant life that's in the game actually mimics what the plant's actual utilization is in real life. Children, they participate in nature through make-believe fantasy. And so being able to go to parks, being able to go to playgrounds and create their own games. You know, they're playing superhero games, they're playing tag, and these are things that they're interpreting as nature for them. Black children participants, they described how they experience nature when they actually have a hobby or they found something that they love to do in it. And so one of my participants described often going to African drumming circles at her local park, which is an activity that was sponsored by the city of Newark. Another activity, picnics. I had a child who was really into gymnastics. And so whenever she goes to the park with her little sisters, she loves to teach them how to do cartwheels, backflips, somersaults. And so these were the things that motivated children to want to be out in nature. It was when they had an activity or when they had a very specific hobby that they love that involved nature. Many of the Black children that I worked with, they did describe how nature was experienced further away from home. And so they were able to be aware and they were able to identify some of the things that they did not see and that they actually had to get in a car or take a bus or a subway ride to another part of town or to another city to access hiking trails, to access lakes, and other like zoos and things of that nature. And then the Black children participants, they described things that they feared in nature, which is very common fears to have, such as being stung by a bee or, you know, something as big as being chased by a bear, eaten by sharks, or being sprayed by skunks. And so they have a very broad awareness of, you know, some of the joys of nature, but then also some of the fears of nature and things that could happen. And then they also named some things they wanted to see in their neighborhood. They want more gardens. They want playgrounds. They want clean parks. They want gardens with trees where they can go and just pick fruit and vegetables and eat it. Fruit trees were a very common thing that children wanted to see. They wanted to come outside and be able to pull an apple off a tree and eat it, because they also love picnics. And then some of the children also displayed a lot of stewardship characteristics, wanting animals to be safe and taken care of, wanting to create habitats for ants and caterpillars, and then also express empathy around climate injustice, understanding that, people and plants and animals need access to clean water, healthy foods, also around animal testing, wanting to use products that didn't harm animals, such as deodorant. Deodorant came up a lot, and just wanting to have like a natural organic lifestyle.
Yes, and just to touch in, like even I gather a lot of these findings, I was nodding my head throughout because I'm like, yes, we see that in our students. The way of stewardship, showing empathy, things that they fear. Like today, even I, the teacher, was really afraid when a spider just crawled down the tree. But after we got over the fear, it was such a gorgeous spider that blended into the leaves of the tree. So these findings, I will even say that are more universal than you think.
And so, what do we already know about just children in general and nature? We know that nature has many health benefits. We know that there are numerous studies that show how nature positively impacts children on a physical level, mental, emotionally, but then also cognitively. And so when we think about those health benefits and just how important proximity and access is, we also think about children who don't get to experience the full health benefits of nature, because of proximity. And so proximity does matter. The likelihood of children participating in nature is heavily influenced by walking distance, public transportation access, um, clean quality. So through parks, gardens, vacant lots where gardens could be built. So quality also matters. And so we know this already. There's numerous studies that point to this. We also know now, as environmental education works to diversify, works to include children of color, we also know that race matters, historically, but then also presently, because we're still feeling the effects presently of history. And so we know that racial segregation and discrimination also excludes children from public areas, so public swimming pools, quality parks and recreational arenas. We also know that there is still a lack of Black presence in media, books, literature that point to positive nature experiences. And so we know that nature is predominantly white. And then myself, as a 33-year-old, I love going hiking. I love participating in nature. I love being outside. And sometimes when I ask friends, oh, let's go hiking, let's go on a camping trip, some of them will say, oh, that's stuff white people do. And it's like, but why? Why is that the broader narrative that only white people participate in this? And I think because we don't see it often, it really fosters this lack of representation, which also impacts our sense of belonging in these spaces. We also know that culture matters. And so culture and race are not synonymous. And so culture can be age, it can be a generational culture, it could be a religious culture, it can be ethnicity, it can be language. And so we know that culture matters, and how we perceive nature. For a lot of Black communities, being outside can sometimes be attributed to danger. And so we're more likely to stay inside. If we live in communities that aren't generally safe, we might stay inside through different weather conditions. And so if it's like a rainy day or a snowy day, we see that as a threat to our health. And so we'll stay inside. And so it's just about education as well. And so just talking about how can we dress appropriately for these weather so that we can still enjoy them. And so a few things that came up in my research were a lot of diversity, equity, and inclusion missed opportunities. And so there are a lot of missed opportunities in research. because there's a lack of research that really specifically focuses on Black children in their natural settings. Most oftentimes we'll get the umbrella of BIPOC or POC, which is like the larger umbrella that encompasses many different races and ethnicities. However, it can also lead to erasure in some aspects because, race matters. And so sometimes the experience of Black people is not the same as Hispanic people or Asian people. And so when we're naming experiences, we want to be very specific about who we're talking about. And generally, research tends to go the BIPOC route, where, we're focusing on children of color or people of color on a broader level, but it doesn't speak to the actual lived reality of what, specifically people are experiencing on a racial level. There are missed opportunities to embed culture. And so if you are a person who is Black, there's a history of nature traditions in our culture. There's a history of nature traditions in Hispanic culture and indigenous cultures and Asian cultures that we often overlook when we're under this larger umbrella of BIPOC. There are missed opportunities for stewardship. And so right now, the narrative that exists in literature is around environmental racism, climate injustice, and all the things that lack or we don't have in our community. But this is also an opportunity to understand how Black children can be empowered as change agents for these many things that we talk about. We talk about air pollution. So how can we create service learning projects in our communities with Black children to address air pollution or to address water pollution and things that they want to see in their communities, which also segues into urban planning. And so if you are someone who works in urban planning committees, if you are involved in your municipal government, think about including Black children in co-creating outdoor spaces simply by asking, well, how many neighborhood parks do you have? How often do you go to the park? Why do you go to the park, or why don't you go to the park? And you'll get a lot of answers. They'll tell you what's missing or what they want to see or why they go or why they don't go. And that's data to then go back to your urban planning committee and say, hey, here's a survey that I did in my community of park utilization, of green space utilization, directly from the source, directly from the benefactors. And this is what they want and this is what they need.
I was trying so hard not to jump in. I was nodding so hard to everything you're saying. And so that's why we gotta go to like why it's important to center and be explicit about Blackness. And Deja talked about that, about like when we say POC, or even when we even use the word BIPOC, we tend to not be heavy on the Black part and be just a little bit, we dance around the subject. So just like Emily shared in the beginning of this presentation, nature-based progressive educational options are not universal or accessible for Black Americans. And when we use the word accessible, we're not just talking about economically. Black Americans live in or near areas with higher air pollution than white Americans, regardless of income level. And that's from a 2018 study. So like putting the lens on Gather, for example, Gather is not located in the neighborhood where I live at or the neighborhood where my co-founder Shelby lives at. So we both live in predominantly Black neighborhoods, but our forest school is located in a predominantly white neighborhood. So again, this is something that touches on all areas of those who identify as Black, regardless of their income. And so this makes it difficult for nature programming to be in or close to, sorry, the chat popped up, close to Black neighborhoods. And so this is where we go into the great outdoors for Black families have historically. And again, Deja talked about this as well as Emily when she shared in the beginning about what has happened to Black families when we talk about the great outdoors. We have been excluded, targeted, and segregated. So in terms of exclusion, we have been excluded from the environmental and conservation movement within the United States for more than a century. The dialogue typically has been currently dominated by the white perspective. And if we go a little bit deeper, the white male perspective. targeted. We have been targeted, killed, stereotyped, and threatened while enjoying nature. So examples of this include the Chicago race riots in 1919 to more recently with Christian Cooper when he was bird watching. And segregated. And Deja talked about this, about that intentionally placed within communities with higher air pollution and lack of green space due to economic segregation as well as redlining.
And so just to build on what Ashley said, redlining is not necessarily a thing of the past, although it is outlawed. We are still feeling the effects of redlining, where we could purchase property or where we could live. The haves, the have-nots, very much a class issue. And so although, it's not blatantly named that redlining exists, but we're still feeling the after effects of it. There's still a lot of undoing to that needs to happen. And so what can we do? While we cannot ignore the realities of environmental racism, climate injustice, and community unwellness, we can create or participate in initiatives that restore children's relationship with the natural world around them in any context. And so when I say any context, I mean any neighborhood style. So whether they live in a rural community, an urban community, suburban community, whether regardless of class. And so there are many things that we can do that restore children and Black children's relationships to nature.
And so this goes into, like, remember we talked at the beginning about how we're moving into a place of action. So what needs to shift? It starts with not seeing Black families and Black children as victims, but as partners in this work. When we see Black families as victims, we begin to count them out based on assumption. Because of this, they can, or because of this, they won't be, 1, interested, or 2, able, or 3, afford it. Like, and the list goes on. And so this conversation needs a different energy, because the thinking should be, because of this, we as a school, as a program, needs to do X, right? When we talk about riding the scales of equity, it comes at a cost every single time, whether that cost is your time, your energy, your feelings of comfort, or even economics. Because when you're riding the scales of equity, it might not make dollars and cents. When you run a program, you're like, wait, we're losing money. And so then that's when we got to bring it back and say, so what's the mission? What's the purpose? So if you are focused on bringing or having Black families and Black children reclaim the outdoors, because again, like Deja said when she talked about that culture piece, we are the original caretakers of the earth. So it's really helping Black children and Black families remember that and reclaim that. And it does come at a cost. And when we're talking about this, it's so important to just highlight that. And I just want to do a little asterisk, because there's something that's trending on Instagram right now, especially for those who follow content creators that talk about the importance of outdoor play. So the thing that is getting trending, saying that we put too much emphasis on outdoor play and we should talk more about indoor, like we shouldn't put the two together. And that whole conversation, it was birthed from what was saying a lens of equity, like, hey, what if people can't, again, this victim language, what if they can't afford it? What if they're not able? And it got so much praise, like it went viral. But this is what I want all of us who are listening to this to just really be cognitive and think about. We all know how important getting outside is, getting fresh air, getting your hands in the dirt, getting sunlight. So when we make these, when we start using this victim style language and start saying like, well, we're just trying to include everybody, what ends up happening is those who identify as Black or those who identify as non-white get pushed to the corner, and the conversation never wraps around about like, hey, how can we actually bring those individuals to the forefront? And so it's very important when we're in these conversations and we're talking about equity, it's like, how are we thinking about power? How are we thinking about the resources? Like, okay, they might not have these resources, but how can we bring them back in? And so, yeah, this is the question. How do we co-create with the Black child in mind? And so, like I shared earlier, it is about power. So let's talk about it. Woke Kindergarten. If you don't follow Akia, please check her out on Instagram or check out her website, www.wokekindergarten, because Akia's stuff is amazing. And so she created a zine about the power children hold. And we thought it connected with what we were talking about today. So the conversation about access and accessibility in nature often rests in external power, power that can be given and taken away based on resources, positions, preference, etc. But when the conversation stays there, it could really leave adults and children feeling hopeless, disempowered, and for me, the worst, complacent. And so that's when we can cue in the internal power. So Akia shares some examples, and that can be the skills, gifts, thoughts, emotions, and our most basic level that sometimes we forget when we're talking about different cultures, that humanity piece. So all children have the ability to think, create, wonder, imagine, care, ask questions, and learn. So how do we create in real time? And I wish it was a simple answer, but it's truly about making that FaceTime with parents and children, truly authentic FaceTime. So how do we build this? So the first thing, some examples could be allowing parents and children to explore your school and program. So let's go a little bit deeper than that. So that might mean an open house in the evening or having weekend opportunities. And also think, when you put yourself in the place of a parent who could be interested in your school, think about, okay, how's my parent getting there? If it's in the evening, what about dinner time? So you might have to offer reimbursement for transportation. You might have to offer food at your open house. But it's thinking about, what resources do you have? How can I equitably spread those resources out to make sure that I'm bringing different cultures and different races into my program? Secondly, create access points within the community. And you'll hear a little bit, give a little spoiler alert, you're going to hear a little bit how Deja did that, right? What local programs can benefit from the land or materials you have. So really thinking about moving this needle about, what resources do I have and what do I feel like I can build a relationship with to share these resources. And lastly, show up with an informational table at events that have a large Black audience or attendance, right? So i.e., festivals, conferences. And I'm going to push y'all. Push that level of comfort. It is very uncomfortable. But again, if you want to bring Black children to your program, you have to be ready to hear that question. How many Black kids go to this school? How many Black kids are in this program? Because putting my parent hat on, I don't want my child to be the only one. So if you only have one child in your program, that's an issue. And so before you start asking more parents to join a board, figure out how are we making sure our program, our school is making that one Black child feel safe. If you have one Black staff member at your school, before you bring in any more people, ask yourself this question: how are we making this 1, 2, 3? How are we making them feel safe? Once that's tackled, then you'll feel more comfortable when a Black parent asks you, how many Black kids go to your school? And you can say, we have one, but these are the things we're doing to make sure this student feels safe in our program.
And then to also add on to that, just thinking about how Honeypot had to recruit, right? Because not only were we introducing a nature program to the city of Newark, which had never been there before, but we were also introducing a Montessori as this new way of learning in Newark. Newark is heavily public school or charter school. And so there's not a big knowledge of anything outside of that, right? And so it's how do I get parents bought into this Montessori method? because oftentimes it's misinterpreted as just kids just playing all day, but there's actual learning that's happening. And so how do I help unlearn some things with families around how kids can learn, or just liberatory pedagogy, period. But then second, how do I get parents bought into like this outside play, this nature-based learning? And so as Ashley mentioned, we had to table, right? Like our school is in one part of Newark, but we had to get to all the wards, right? And so there's back to school festivals, there's health festivals, there's food giveaways, food drives, and any opportunity that we saw to be out in the community, we took it. Like we were calling, hey, can we set up a table and have like an activities table at this event? And so, we would get out there, we would set up an information table for Honeypot, but then also an activity table so that kids can actually come up and interact with us and maybe play around with some of the Montessori materials, or do a nature-based activity with their parent, and so that parents can see, okay, this is what this school has to offer. These are some of the things that they're going to be doing. And so we weren't just in the central ward of Newark, which is like the major downtown gentrified part. We were in the West Ward, the North Ward, South, East, and we were just getting out there, recruiting parents. And so if parents couldn't come to us, let's find a way to go to them. And then also just setting up access points within the community. Right now we are a Montessori school, and so we have a school day schedule, Monday through Friday, 7 to 5 p.m. That's our hours. And so the only kids who really get the privilege of experiencing a nature programming are kids who are enrolled in our program between the ages of 2.5 to 6 years old. And so we thought, how can we expand our access? And so we launched a Saturday nature program in September, and we widen our age gap. And so we don't just have 3 to 6 year olds, we have kids who are as young as 2 all the way up until 12, 13, who come out on Saturdays with their parents and engage in nature learning, where we don't even have it at our school building. We have it at local parks throughout the city, because this is a way for us to expose families to what exists in their communities. And so one weekend we might be at Branchbrook Park, which is in the north side of Newark, or we might be at Weequahic Park, which is in the south part of Newark, or we might be in Military Park, which is downtown Newark. And so we're kind of like a moving Saturday program to expand our access to parents. And so these are ways that you can build FaceTime, not with just families and kids, but with the community overall. And it's a great marketing tactic too, where you're saying, hey, I'm not just isolated to like the kids that I have or the families that I work with. We want to welcome everyone to our program, and we're going to do the work and get out there to you if getting to us is like a challenge.
Yes, and Gather has the same, just like you, about our community events that are typically on the weekend to get Black families and communities out in nature and see that it can be done and it be safe and it's fun. So yes, it is about finding different ways of how can we plug folks in and meet people at different places on their journey.
Mm-hmm.
And so that goes into like, how do we expand the imagination of what nature is? Because when you think about nature programs for schools, you think about like, we're surrounded by trees, or like for Gather, we're co-located in community gardens. So we do have access of a lot of nature. But if there's people listening in and say like, well, I don't have that, listen, we could start right with some potted plants, some soil, and some sunlight. So with potted plants, grow plants indoors. It doesn't have to be elaborate. You literally can start with germinating a bean or a sweet potato in a glass jar and observing with the children what is below the surface and what is above. The soil, like if you have access to dirt, and if you tell me like I live only around concrete, baby, go to Walmart, Lowe's, Home Depot, and get you a bag of soil, because research shows that getting your hands in soil, the microbes and bacteria in soil actually can help your immune system. It helps your social emotional health, and it can fight off depression. So it's really important to get out in soil. And so if you have access to dirt, you could be a dirt scientist and learn about the different layers of soil and the animals that live in it. You can even go a step further and get this your soil measured to see what nutrients are in it. And lastly, getting sun on your skin is so important. That ties to what I was sharing earlier about that conversation about outdoor play versus indoor play. We know outside is important, especially for those who identify as Black, because we need that. The body produces vitamin D. It helps the body do that. It helps uplift and regulate moods. It lowers blood pressure. It regulates circadian rhythms and it improves sleep to just get out in the sun.
Yeah, and yesterday Ashley and we were talking about some of our childhood experiences in a preschool, and I think one of the most memorable things that, I've done as a teacher now is where we've kind of raised caterpillars into butterflies. That's something that's done inside that can easily connect children to like life cycle of insects. There was one year we took care of chameleons. We've done tadpoles into frogs. We've done mealworms into beetles. And so there's so many things, even like raising chicks, eggs to chicks. And so that's a great nature activity where not only are you expressing and you're developing empathy for animals and learning how to take care of them, learning about their natural habitat, and then also just learning about the life cycle and how, the life cycle of many different insects and animals are similar and different to our life cycle as humans. And so these are great ways to do place-based learning if outside or if wilderness education is a challenge for you. And then there's even some things that we've done with children around taste testing. And so we'll talk about different fruits and vegetables, different parts of a plant. And then we'll talk about vegetables that are associated with that part. And so what are some seeds that we can eat? And how do these seeds relate to this plant? You have to plant a seed and watch it grow. What are some leaves that we can eat? What are some fruits that we can eat? What are some root vegetables that we eat that are similar to like the roots of different flowers that we like? And so these are some great ideas to really connect children to nature. And it's fun for them. It's a sensory experience for them as well. And so in practice, and this is where we're going to talk about our schools. So Honeypot Montessori, before we were actually a Montessori school, we were a community initiative, which looked like us doing programs after school and on weekends around nature and Black children. And we got the idea to be a Montessori school when I had come into Wildflower Foundation. And Wildflower Foundation is a national nonprofit that really helps teachers develop their own micro schools. And I knew very early that I wanted to do something different in Newark because I had been an educator for 9 years up to this point with Newark Public Schools and then also with the Newark Charter School System. And so I wanted to find something that was a little bit more developmentally appropriate for children, but something that allowed them to explore, be creative, and really retain a lot of childhood that we lost, when we were coming up, just kind of bring us back to that innocence, bring us back to that sense of wonder. And one of the first things that we did was we planted a pea garden. We had a nice bed created for us with soil. We created a pea garden. And the kids were more fascinated with the soil. They were more fascinated with finding worms in the soil and thousand-leggers and spiders. And I think I was very observant of how they reacted to these things. It was like the best thing in the world. Like they won $1 million when they found a worm. And for some of the kids, it was just like, ew, worms. But there was still like this, it was like a playful ooh, like not like oh, it's disgusting. And so I wanted children to have that experience all the time, but it was also data for me to see how children don't get out as much, because these are things that are common to us now as adults, but for a kid, it's everything, it's a whole new discovery for them. And so we are in Newark. We're in the greater Newark area. We are in year 2, which is very great. And we have a very growing enrollment. And so yeah. Honestly, I didn't know what I would get when we opened our doors because, like I said, there was a lot of parent education that needed to happen just around risk play, Kids are going to get hurt. They're going to get scrapes. They're going to get cuts and bruises. And so that was something that a lot of parents had to kind of unlearn. And, I'm not a parent, but I'm pretty sure if I was a parent, I would be a little on edge too if my kid had like a scrape or a cut. But it was a big part of my childhood. It built character for me to get hurt a little bit. But then also there was the idea or the concept around safety, dressing for different weathers. Being a Black woman, hair is everything for us. And, getting your hair done on a rainy day, it can be a complete waste of money, and it's something that we try to avoid if we can. And so oftentimes when it's a rainy day, people would rather stay inside, or if it's a snowy day, people would rather stay inside. And so through our Saturday programs, every single Saturday in October was a rainy day. And I was like, oh man, no one's going to show up. No one's going to come. But I made sure in the newsletters and in the messages that I sent to parents about Saturdays was to also include visuals and images and videos about how to dress appropriately for rain, how to dress appropriately for wind, for like storms. And so I was very pleased to see that people were still coming out, to the Saturday programs despite the weather. And the children, they would come out in their rain jackets, their rain boots, and they're splashing in puddles, they're playing in mud, getting dirty. And so it's a great time. And like, here's some pictures of children doing a tree ID with one of our partners at Branchbrook Park, looking for treasures, and treasures were leaves and sticks and really unique shaped rocks, and doing leaf collages. And so these are some things that we did over the year with them.
I want to talk a little bit about how Gather Forest School got started. Because I read a couple of comments in the chat about like, it is hard to get Black families. And like, even though Deja and I both identify as Black, it's an uphill battle. So Gather was started by 9 families who said yes to outdoor education. But when I tell you we had to build FaceTime and talk time, we talked to over 50 parents. And when I tell you, I was talking to families sometimes 7, 8 o'clock at night. And these were not like 15-minute conversations. They were at minimum an hour, because family wanted to know exactly what Deja just shared. What about risky play? What do I do when it gets cold? What do you do in the rain? How are you handling academics? And so it's really moving in a place of like, okay, these questions are 100% valid. They're probably the only one in their immediate family that's doing something in progressive education or something a little untraditional. And we had to like build that time to just meet parents where they are. And then we did have a couple of families who were like, got it. I get the mission. I love it. Sign me up. But when I said that was very few, that was like 2 families when we started out. And so it takes so much time to start something new. And so that does not include all the no's. We got so many no's we received to find an affordable location to host our school. Because, right, it's 2-part. You got to get the parents, but you also got to have a place to have the school. And like what Shelby and I experienced, we didn't have a location available in our predominantly Black neighborhoods. And when I tell you, people had no idea what we were talking about, 1, and 2, we are extremely explicit about Blackness. And so we also had to like overcome that hurdle of what people assume when you say you're going to have a bunch of Black kids in a predominantly white space. And what does that mean? And so I would just want to encourage all of y'all on this call to create something new, regardless if you are in a nature program or you're trying to do something else new. You have to be willing to be bold, creative, and the most important thing is persistent. Because I know a comment was asking about how do our Saturday program turn out. I can answer, and then Deja, if you want to answer that question. When Shelby and I first started Saturday school, there might be 1 or 2 parents that came. And when I tell you, like, it was such an investment for Shelby and I to get up early in the morning, prepare, drive all the way there, set up, stay for the length of the Saturday school, which was 2 to 3 hours, and then clean up for 2 families. But listen here, the families that showed up for Saturday school are now going to our school. So it goes back to like, what is your intention? Because you can't always look at the number of who shows up, because the families that showed up to Saturday school are now the families that are pouring into our school with our parent council, helping with events. They are giving so much more, and we had no idea. We're like, hey, we have this idea, we're just going to push through, and you never know what's going to come on the other side of just being consistent and persistent.
Yep. And just to piggyback off of that, I think we got lucky because our enrollment for Honeypot were homeschooling parents. And so most of our parents were homeschooling parents that just needed some help with how to like homeschool their kids. And they just weren't bought in anymore to public school or charter schools. And then when they learned my background, like I've worked in charter schools and public schools and kind of just segued out of it, there was kind of like, okay, like she understands the shift, right? She understands why we're shifting. But then like I said, there's that outdoor aspect. For the first couple of days, we had some kids with some busted lips and and I have a lot of parent anxiety just from working in charter schools. Sometimes parents can be a little challenging, a little bit more challenging than kids. And so I wasn't sure how parents were going to respond to like bust a lip or, maybe like a cut or something. And so some parents did freak out, but it was also a learning experience for me as an educator on how to reassure parents that, these are normal parts of child development, because risk play teaches them how to think critically, right? And so if I jumped on this log and I fell and I bust my lip, maybe I shouldn't do that again. Or maybe I should just try it a different way that might be a little bit safer for me to do. And so these are how children come into that critical thinking, by having these experiences, because if they don't mess up, or if they don't, for lack of a better words, fail, how do they know how to redirect, or how do they know how to critical think or problem solve? And so these were some rationales that we were able to give parents. And then also just thinking about our childhood, these were the things that we did as kids. But because we're so disconnected from our childhood at our ages, I started to notice that when we launched the Saturday school, it was a parent drop off. And so we were giving the parents the knowledge, oh, you don't have to stay, it's 3 hours, drop off, come back. But we noticed that there was such a big curiosity in parents that they wanted to stay. And so now all of the parents stay, they participate. And I think it's an opportunity for them to reconnect with their inner children and reconnect with nature for them. And so most of the kids who come to Saturday are kids who are enrolled with us, but because we've increased the age gap, we get siblings, or we have moms sharing with other moms, hey, did you hear about the Saturday program? And so we're getting emails every day or text messages from our current parent, like, hey, do you have room for one more? Do you have room for 3 more? And we're just like, yeah, send them. It's free. The more the merrier. However, I did see something in the chat that mentioned subsidy programs. So Honeypot is a state licensed childcare center. And so we are licensed by the state of New Jersey, which helps us on a tuition level, because we are a tuition-based school. But because we are state licensed, it puts us in the running for state vouchers, subsidy programs. So for parents who do fall on the lower side of like the income, they're able to get financial assistance to send their kids to Honeypot. And so that opens up so many opportunities for parents to have options for where they like to send their kid to school. And so that was something that did give us like a little bit of insurance, like in terms of enrollment, because we are able to connect with all different classes of parents.
So yes, if you want to connect, please, 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 because we are a tuition-based program, so we don't get any funding from the state. So if you want to connect, if you have questions there, please hit us up at our email, gatherschool@gmail.com. I didn't add a lot of pictures of Gather because I want y'all to follow us on IG at gather.school. One, to see how we're using the space, to see our beautiful Black children, but also how we're talking about how we're incorporating Blackness into the work. So please follow us. And you can also follow me at afrocentric.montessori if you are curious. I know there was a question in there about how Montessori is different when you add that Blackness to it. So follow me there. And again, please join our Mighty Networks where we have all the conversations there.
And if you are interested in connecting with me, I saw a few viewers asking for my research or to read my dissertation or wanting to learn about Honeypot. You can email me at deja@honeypotmontessori.org. You can follow us at Honeypot Montessori on Instagram, and then there's our website.
Thank you both so much. Such a fantastic conversation. My gears are already turning about how we can do a follow-up, how we can do more. But I know that Deja and Ashley are not the only two folks doing this work. We really hope that we can have more conversations like this, more presentations like this, more people sharing their experiences and their perspectives. So I put up this slide about our conference, which is coming up next summer. We'll be in Portland, Oregon for our 10th anniversary of the National Nature-Based Early Learning Conference. And we're going to be opening the call for proposals very soon in the next couple of weeks. So we want more presentations like this represented at the conference. And so if you are someone who's doing this work, and you have something to share, I really highly encourage you to submit a proposal for the conference. And we really hope to see a lot of you there next year, both in person, and we'll also have virtual opportunities as well. So I just wanted to close on that. And another huge thank you to Deja and to Ashley and to all of you for being here today. So thank you so much. And we hope that you all have a wonderful rest of your day.